right, welcome back to the third video in a row. Yay. Podcast in a row. So does this make this podcast number 6 or podcast number 3? I'm guessing podcast number 3. I don't math. Anyway, so yes, this is, I was wrong about PSA part 3. I think this is the final one in that. I will probably still continue adding videos to this playlist just because we're still talking about PSA. But after this, you'll get the new branding thing next week. So that will be cool. I'm looking forward to that. And oh, something else. So I have learned that there is this thing called YouTube Community that's kind of like Facebook, where you can post, posts and images and stuff like that. So I'm excited because I didn't even know that existed. And this is now a brand channel, and I didn't lose subscribers when I moved it over. That was nerve-wracking, but now I don't even know what that means, except that everyone said I should do it. So, okay, I'm now a brand channel. And yeah, okay, so let's dive into the third and final way that I was wrong about PSA. All right, so in the 3 original videos in this playlist, I said the PSA was the what and Christus Victor was the how. I think that was what I said. And I thought that they were compatible. And we saw in yesterday's video how they are not compatible because they have completely different documents nailed to the cross, and one was literally removed for the other one to be put there. Okay, so, but the issue, the issue is to make them compatible, I had to tweak PSA because I did not understand PSA. Now, I have noticed other YouTube apologist articles that I've read online that have also said that Christus Victor and penal substitution is compatible. But when they do it, they tweak Christus Victor to make it fit. So I didn't understand PSA, and I made it and I tweaked it to make it compatible, and they didn't understand Christus Victor and tweaked it to make it compatible. So for in other words, I made the document on the cross basically the right thing. I mean, we kind of covered that 2 podcast episodes ago. And so I tweaked penal substitution to fit that document. And what most people do is they force Christus Victor, they tweak Christus Victor to fit the demands of divine justice document. And they're 2 completely different frameworks. It's either one framework has one roof and the other framework has the other roof. It's not a 2-roof building. All right, so in today's video, wrapping up the last thing that I had wrong, I said that what needed to be satisfied, I was tweaking it. Well, I was still trying to use that word. Interesting. What needed to be satisfied was the death penalty, and that the death penalty was mortality and, death, and Jesus died. And so he satisfied that. Okay, so now let's think about this for a minute here, okay? In PSA, Jesus died as your substitute. He underwent something on your behalf that you won't. So what happened to Jesus that won't happen to you or me because Jesus did it for us? I need Jeopardy music. Do, 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 do. Can't be death now, can it? Because we're going to die. So, yes. So if Jesus is your substitute, he didn't die for you. He died something else. He didn't die literally for you. He died what? Metaphorically. He underwent some sort of metaphorical death for you because you were still going to die. The most basic, most common expressions or phrases used would be that Jesus' relationship with his Father was broken, that Jesus experienced separation from his Father so that you could be reconciled to the Father. And so this would be when Jesus cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Because God had laid on him the sins of the world, and then turned his back on Jesus because he can't look at sin. We will get into all the exegesis for all of that. And Jesus cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And that is because he was suffering the separation that you and I deserve because of our sin, which means the wages of sin is the separation from God, not death. And so Jesus suffered that penalty of sin on your behalf. He is separated so that you are not. So I'm sure you already can see all the metaphor and how many verses now have to be interpreted that way. So going all the way back to Genesis 3, why were Adam and Eve kicked out of the garden? Oh, they were banished from God's presence. I cannot tell you how many children's Bibles, we're talking children's storybooks, that say Adam and Eve sinned and God kicked them out of the garden because he was angry. Yeah. No, that's not what Genesis 3 says. Genesis 3 says the wages of sin is death, as in mortality, as in you're going to turn into dust from whence you came, and the tree of immortality is in this garden. Therefore, you must leave the presence of the tree of immortality. And of course, we already looked at the fact that Jesus did not ask God on the cross, "Why have you forsaken me?" Jesus was shouting out Psalm 22. We talked about that. I think it's in the second video of the playlist. They didn't have chapters and verses back then. The first line of a psalm is the title of that psalm. And the first line of Psalm 22 is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And so that is what Jesus was calling out. Now, why is he calling out? Again, we covered this, but this is an extremely predictive psalm about Jesus' death. They're gambling over his clothes. They're piercing his hands and feet. So yeah, he is directing the people's attention to the fact that he is not forsaken. That's the other part. At the end, it clearly says the afflicted one is not forsaken by God as it appeared. God has not turned his face from the afflicted one. Psalm 22 literally proves God did not turn his back on Jesus on the cross. And yet it's taken out of context, which is called atomistic, I believe. It's an exegetical fallacy, just for the record. So his line is taken completely out of context to make it sound like he's saying something he's not saying. And of course, no one said this until post-16th century. So no one ever interpreted it that way. In fact, the early church fathers actually mentioned this verse quite a few times and flat out denied that he was forsaken by the Father. So yeah, we have definitely establishing the idea that this is not the historic view. PSA might be right. I can't prove it's right or wrong. I can prove it's not historic. I can also prove that it's not literal, grammatical, historical, but we'll do that next week and the week after that. That I was most certainly wrong about that, considering the fact that believers have died for the last 2,000 years, and I will most likely die, and you will most likely die. Really think about that now. So I'm sorry. But we've all been so indoctrinated with these terms that I don't think we stop to think about what we're even saying sometimes, what we're actually being taught. And I did that, and I am sorry. And hopefully I don't do it again. So, yeah. Okay. So that wraps up the last I was wrong about PSA. All right. So until then, just keep standing firm.